Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. Can't even say the name of my own event. Kaizen Central from Zanut TV, and a very warm welcome to you all. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and that we've got a really good session for us today, and just letting a load of people into the meeting. So while we talk about what we're going to be hearing from Jeremy Bowley, where's Jeremy? Waiting for his video to come on. It's a great pleasure to welcome Jeremy Bowley from Insider Pro, which released its manufacturing barometer this week. I hope some of you had a chance either to see a bit of the video. I'm sorry I sent the wrong link. I do not know how that happened, but I'm grateful to you and Lloyd Baker for picking me up on that. Jeremy, we've got about 8 people just processing into the room, so I'm reluctant to ask you to get going to talk about it, simply because I want to make certain that everybody has a chance to hear what's going on. So we'll just give it just a couple more minutes. As I say, that we've got
of Insider Pro. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. This has been a special report from Zanut TV.
Hello, who's playing me? Okay, right. Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Kaizen Central. Jeremy Bowley has very kindly joined us from Insider Pro. He produced a report which came out on Monday, and I thought it was so striking when I saw it under embargo this time last week that I thought I'd do an interview with him, because it said to me something fundamental about the state of manufacturing, because we've all been glued to the pandemic and what the pandemic is doing, not just to our sector, but to the entire UK economy. In many ways, actually, I think manufacturing's doing slightly better than other sectors. But the fact is that what the report said, on the headline at least, is that while we've been improving in terms of sales over the last 5 or 6 years, actually margins and profitability have been squeezed. And in all the concern and worry and possible disaster for some companies around the pandemic, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that something fundamentally has been going on with manufacturing's finances. I won't take any more steam from Jeremy's engine. I'll just pass it straight over to him. And Jeremy, if you'd like to just amplify what I've been saying, 5 years of increasing sales, but not making as much money as manufacturers were before.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Absolutely right. I mean, it was a really interesting piece of research to do. We looked at 1,500 UK manufacturers across the piece. So quite an in-depth piece of work that we did. And I'll give you a bit of the sense of the story that the data told us. So as you say, sales were up 21% over the 5-year period. That was good news. Mostly volumes versus prices was our sense of the data. In that period, though, profit margins fall from 7.2 to 6%. It's a considerable drop, and interestingly, it chimes a lot with what we hear from people day in, day out, talking to them about their businesses. And you can sort of say, well, okay, we're working harder, we're not making more money, but surely that will sort itself out. And I think my next moment when we looked at the data went to cash. So what do we know? We know cash is key in businesses, and that's the most important thing to keep them running and keep them vibrant and keep them investing. So we then started looking at the cash side of things, and that was fascinating. So we found that actually we got slightly better at collecting cash. I think there's been more of a focus on that. So we've got a bit better at collecting cash from customers. So by about 3 days over the period. So that's okay. We did not do any better about getting better credit terms from our suppliers. That will come, I'm sure, as absolutely no surprise to a number of you. That was interesting. It's still a pretty difficult position because really, we've got a real imbalance between creditor days and debtor days. So on average, sort of 33 to sort of 38 generally. So you're always out of pocket as a manufacturing business. Again, that would chime with, I'm sure, your experience of running your businesses too. But here's the crazy thing as well. At the same time, stock got out of control, really. So stock went from 55 days up to 61, and that was really quite worrying. So we worked a lot harder over the last 5 years. We didn't make any extra money. We ate into our cash reserves. And then in the last 12 months, what's happened? So we've had uncertainty around Brexit, and we've had a pandemic. And my sense is, that has taken some of the steam out of industry generally, and certainly some sectors more hit than others. But we now face, as a sector, growing our businesses back to normal volumes after the interruptions and after the challenges that we've seen. And what do we know? We know that when we grow a business, that sucks cash up pretty fast. So I think of it as the last 5 years, we couldn't maintain margins. Our cash reserves are depleted. We've been hit by this horrendous event and in the pandemic, and obviously the natural uncertainty around Brexit. And now we need those cash reserves more than ever. We don't have them. So I'm not predicting a catastrophe going forward. I'm saying that I think we have not given enough focus on cash, generally speaking, as a general principle over the last few years. And I think the real challenge now is to say, okay, rather than thinking necessarily about the lending side of things, although that is useful as a sort of short-term tactic, and that can be very helpful, we now need to start looking at our own businesses and saying, how do we make cash visible so we all understand where we are on cash? How do we factor that in to decision makings? And how do we start to get our processes and how we work under control, which means, inventory, suppliers, customers, and working on those things. So I think, Nick, that's I think my probably brief summary of the report, and there's a ton of data and information in there that you guys can read at leisure.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I guess really the question is, does that strike a chord with anybody's experiences over the last 6 years? And the person I'd like to put on the spot first, he's got his camera and his sound turned off, but I'll ask him to unmute, is Lee. It's on the question of pricing, because Lee Howarth put out a note on LinkedIn earlier in the year or late last year saying that people are cutting their prices. And you're saying, Jeremy, that prices did not hold up in accordance with the volume. So more volume, and there was pressure on pricing. Lee, can you hear me? Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So what was your point about pricing? And make it 6 minutes. I want to bring Paul Brooks into it, but it's just this point.
Effectively, everybody's being squeezed for a penny. We were having regular customers where we're supplying quality products. We have price X. Supplier comes back and says, oh, company B that we've just found who's approached us can do it for Y and Z. We do a bit of number crunching and we say, crack on, off you go, best of luck. And there was one instance, it was a 6 off components, very high value in terms of material. They were quite small, but the material content alone was approximately £650. We had some 5-axis work to go into it, which equated to approximately 4.5 hours. We had to provide a fare. We had to provide quality packaging. And I think our price was around the 900 quid mark. So all in all, we weren't making a huge amount of money on this. The customer was getting quoted just under £800. So it was more or less, they were doing it for next to nothing. And we decided to draw a line in the sand and think, no, because of the risk factor, if we were to make one mistake on one component, then we've lost money. So the risk is so high that we've just decided, no, this is our value, this is our niche, this is our service. You want quality, you want on time, in full, 0 rejects. Everything that's associated with that has a cost. And we can't be doing it for 30 quid an hour. It's as simple as that.
Okay, so Lee, thank you very much for that. That's a real insight. Paul Brooks, Santander, what is your experience as a bank serving the manufacturing sector? What is your experience of the last 5 years and listening to what Jeremy's had to say?
Thanks, Nick. I think a couple of observations from me. I think Jeremy's report, which I had a chance to have a quick look through earlier, as we mentioned briefly earlier, is a very good one. I think what struck me about the report was that it looks primarily at businesses that have revenues of 50 million and above. I think what I should say is that in terms of the manufacturing team within Santander and the business that we look after, we certainly look after businesses above 50 million, probably up to a couple of 100 million, but there are quite a lot of businesses below a 50 million revenue as well. So it's fair to point out that we're probably not comparing like for like in terms of the businesses that all the businesses I look after on a day-to-day basis. I suppose 5 years ago seems an awful long time ago now, so I'm not sure I can give a good sort of overview of what's happened in those 5 years. The comments have already been made, sort of very much strike a chord with me. I think in the last 12 months, we've seen businesses really focusing on their cash very carefully, and making some fundamental changes very quickly, forced on them by the COVID pandemic. I think overall, I've been surprised by the majority of businesses that have seemingly been able to create cash from their working capital cycles. And I've looked at some aspects of the report, and I think Jeremy's quite right in calling out how businesses should try and maximize their inventory planning, etc., and give less credit if they can, and seek more credit. But in my experience, particularly in the smaller end, I think businesses they don't have the luxury of making those choices. In a lot of cases, they're part of the overall structure. And if they want to do business with a bigger customer or a bigger supplier, they have to take the terms that are on offer. So I think that the comments that Jeremy made, I would certainly endorse as things that businesses should be looking to do. I think in the last number of years, the reality is not many businesses have had the luxury of being able to make those changes and look at their supply chain and bring things closer to home, because it hasn't been viable to do so. Maybe with a pandemic, they'll be forced to maybe look a bit harder and maybe have a few more options. So I recognise quite a few of the things that are in the report, but I wonder if the same questions are asked of the smaller businesses, smaller manufacturing businesses below 50 million revenue, whether we would see the same, probably an even greater tale of pressure over that period.
Yeah, this question of what Lee was saying about the sort of relentless, remorseless pressure from to squeeze prices and competition coming in at a quantum level lower than the best quote you can offer. Jeremy, I know your company has a great deal of experience with supply chain management. Part of the report does talk about reducing complexity in supply chains, and that may be a source of freeing up some cash. Can you go into that in a bit more detail, please?
Yeah, we do a lot of this sort of work. So we spend a lot of time looking at supply chains and saying, two things. One, how can I improve margin? Obviously, so that we are always on the hunt for our customers for improving the prices of products that they pay. But more and more, and increasingly more, as the pressure is on cash and is on cycle time, is to say, how do we take out complexity? So I've done quite a bit of repatriation work, and here's a positive spin on this with customers to say, we were buying this from China, where the perception is that the items are cheaper, or from other locations, and we've been successful in bringing back some of that production to the UK. Now, That has some significant advantages, obviously, given the sort of shipping costs over the last quarter or so. You're taking out some of those sort of crazy high shipping prices that we saw. You're also shortening that supply chain. You shorten that supply chain, you improve the working capital position, which is good. You're sending less work out, and I think there's a real appetite in some of the bigger customers that I work for looking for more local, more agile production, even if that means giving away a few points of margin. So I think I see some real positives here. There is, for the right sorts of businesses, significant opportunity, because every business now does not have the luxury of looking purely at let's go and buy it from a very, very low cost economy and that'll be the answer to all of our woes. It won't be, and it increasingly won't be. We must be more agile and more resilient, and I think that does create great opportunities for UK businesses.
Yes, I was very impressed pre-pandemic. I went round the Siemens plant. Heavens above! It's the name has completely escaped me. It's the one that's in a suburban part of Cheshire where they can't expand the factory, and they
Congleton.
Sorry,
Congleton.
Of course, sorry, brain fade. And what was brilliant about it was that the way that they competed, not just against outside competition, but also inside the Siemens family competition, was they had to come up with ways to be more efficient and offer better service. And it was all about better production processes, squeezing every last bit out of it to remain competitive. And that, of course, is very much an Industry 4.0 story, because they were able to do that by digital communications inside the factory, and of course very strong lines of communication with their customers. I'd just like to ask anybody who's actually done that with their processes and their products in order to be more competitive and offer better service. It's not just about price, it's about service and time. Who could put their hand up and say they can address that? And given that I'm looking at two screens, please be patient if I don't get to you immediately. Has anybody had an experience of doing that in their factory? Okay. No, in that case, Alison, I'm going to go to you, because you talked about in the chat box about what's been happening in the US, and one of the biggest companies on the block has actually behaved in a way that we'd like to see companies over here behave. Please go ahead. Good evening to you as well.
Good to see everybody. Yeah, I was here at 1 o'clock, not 2 o'clock my time because of the time difference. I forgot how that shifted. So Lockheed Martin came to us and I guess sent out letters to everyone back in April of last year. And, it was right when there was still a lot of uncertainty and a lot of, this will be over by the summer attitude. And they said they were moving from net 30 to net 15 in an effort to help promote that cash flow with their suppliers. And, it wasn't just something that they said and didn't do. It was something that they did. And funny enough, I started seeing it before I got the letter. I thought there was a problem. So I'd gone to my boss and said, we just got paid 2 weeks early on a really big order and I don't know what to do. So it was a good surprise.
That is an extraordinary story, because everything we've been hearing is about how larger companies, and Jeremy's research, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy's research bears this out, that larger companies have been actually squeezing smaller companies in order to conserve their own cash flow. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, there are no surprises in the standard dynamics of the world, right? So big companies will push smaller companies around, and we see that time and time again. I think there are a few cases. And Alison, I love that example that you gave. It's admirable. I've worked with probably over 100 companies looking at sort of the supply chain side. I can count with the fingers on one hand of how many times I've seen that. So, it's great to hear about it, but it's not reality for most people. I think you all know that. And that's disappointing. So I think we have to think, if we are in smaller businesses, we have to start thinking about how do we improve that situation? And the answer is, and it's a difficult answer, the answer for me lies in customer acquisition. It says, where can we find a more diverse customer base, so we have more options in that negotiation. And I'm always heartened by the stories that people give of saying, you know, I could say no, I wasn't prepared to take the risk. I think Lee, that was you that talked about that earlier. I really like that, because it's when we stand up that we'll find really how much of that pressure is reality and how much of that pressure is just part of that negotiation process. And I think you may be surprised to learn that as smaller companies, we have a lot more power in those sorts of negotiations than we often realize.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I saw some people nodding there. Ram, would you like to come in?
Yes, the one thing, hello everybody, first of all, the one thing I've noticed more than anything else is more than the bigger companies, it's the other SMEs whom I've had a problem with their payment terms. They say 60 days from the end of the month, which means if I submit my invoice on the 1st of January, end of January is the end of the month, and then there's 60 days after that, which is totally 90 days. Second thing is, they say they don't pay anything upfront for consultancy services, which means I have to do the work, then put the invoice in, and then wait 90 days, you know. I've experienced this kind of a problem with some of the SMEs more than the bigger companies. The bigger companies we work with, they pay within 14 days, 28 days, no problem. It's some of the SMEs, not everyone. There's one or two here and there who give everyone a bad name. And that's what I've experienced personally. I don't know how it is for the others though.
Yeah, Lee, you had another point to make, I think.
As ever, cash is king, as Jeremy states. Now, we invest very heavily in technology and to ensure we can be competitive and provide a prompt, reliable service with all the associated documentation that comes with aerospace type technology customers and primes. We suffer with the chalk and the cheese. One aerospace company that makes helicopters, both here and in Italy. If you deal with the Italians, then you got a long time to wait for your money, and it can be as long as 8 months. So do you really want to do business with them, with all the cash flow implications? And then we have other companies who we are under pressure to provide continuous cost down. We've invested heavily in automation. We've eliminated waste. This is working with the customer. But what we managed to negotiate was, okay, you want a cost down. We can only give you that if we can purchase larger amounts of material, inventory, Jeremy, to get the raw materials at a better price that we can then share with you. However, we put parameters in place. So for argument's sake, we offered a rebate. So if you want more discount, you give us more turnover. And then at the end of the month, if you hit X, we will give you this. And we've managed to secure that. And then we have Rolls-Royce, who I'm pleased to say are paying 30 days on time. So there's a proper mixture across the board. It's continuity I'm looking for.
Sure. Yeah, and chopping and changing, I'm sure, is disruptive. Steve Murphy, I understand you have been preparing your soapbox. Now, please climb on it and deliver.
No, I think this brings me back to the areas that are more interesting to me, or more my field, and that is typically to what extent have we succeeded in encouraging smaller SMEs to really embrace. Well, I'll put it up: continuous improvement, waste reduction. You could put it into the categories of Lean or Six Sigma. But I'd really just like to say, look, how do we take waste out of our organization? Listening to Lee, it's something it's obvious he's embraced. But I would say that is not particularly well embraced by SMEs. And it's an area where it's a bit like a foundation that we continually seem to ignore. So it's a bit like how do we train our people so that they can run cross-functional teams, so that they can save a percent scrap here, a percent scrap there every couple of months, and it's that sort of embracing of the continuous routine activity across the whole organization. I'm not just talking about the shop floor. I'm even talking about even the drawing office. do you work to a drawing office standard that means the risk of you releasing a poor drawing is just about zero? And I've worked with companies that have done that off their own back. So I've challenged companies as a QA manager when I've gone in and they've said, you know, we've got the guys on the shop floor, you know, they're hot seating biros. And I'd go in and I'd say, I'm not interested. What I want to know is how much waste you've taken out of your marketing campaign. Is your marketing campaign, have you used designed experiments to run it? Are you visiting people still instead of getting onto Skype? And it's that continuous reduction in waste, or continuously more making your organization more effective. And I think sometimes there's a reluctance to do this, because it often means that senior people, in order to provide the leadership, may have to stand up and say, I didn't do everything I did in the past, or I could have been better. And you have to do that. That's part of my job. I have to man up and do that. So that's the sort of area that I find that really has not been embraced broadly enough. And it's something we can do. I put it into the category of what we can do for nothing. So we can always draw this sort of activity. You don't need a budget for it. You can start with nothing, but it is the hardest stuff to do. And I don't think we're championing that enough. We're not championing it enough. And then we're saying, okay, once we've learned how to do something better for nothing, how do we digitize that? If we can do a risk analysis, how do we digitize it so that it's easier for everyone to understand? If you can run SPC, how do you digitize it? If you need an MES, how do you digitize it? Once you've got the basic skills, there are now tools like 4IR that help you to do them even better and quicker. But I just don't see that picture coming through for the manufacturing sector. It tends to focus more on just putting in better equipment or squeezing margins. And that drive to improve quality is that vision is just not there. It's something I fight for because that's my living. But
okay, well, Steve Murphy, thank you. That soapbox is worth getting on. Thank you. I've got a couple of hands up at the moment, but I just want to say thank you to Paul Brooks for being with us this evening. Paul, I know you've got to dash in a second, so you know it'd be good to if you've got any further thoughts or on this before you go.
I'd probably like to pick up with Jeremy separately, actually, and learn a little bit more about the report, because there's certainly things in there. I just wondered if, with the larger businesses, he'd taken into account some of the supplier finance and payments that they use. With certainly might be ways in which their collection of debts is looking better, perhaps. But I'll pick that up with him offline. But yeah, sorry, I've got to leave you halfway through tonight, but yeah, it was a good report, and I'll delve into it again tomorrow.
Thanks, Paul. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks all. Bye now.
Right, Roy, can I turn to you? You put your hand up.
Yeah, so first of all, I've got to be cautious here, because 20 to 1 odds of SMEs versus prime contractors, that doesn't sound like a good place to start a fight. But I'm
going to interrupt you. I should point out to Jeremy that Roy is give us your title, Roy, because it's a new one. I've forgotten it. Apologies.
Oh, head of digital mock-up processes and implementations at Airbus Defence and Space. So yeah, I'm not defending primes, but just to pick up on one of Alison's points, actually. We found last year as a defence contractor, we were being paid extremely promptly by the MOD, and the expectation was that we then paid down the supply chain in a prompt manner as well. But outside of COVID, when we write contracts with the MOD to supply equipment, they have a clause in there where they request that we conform to whatever our normal commercial terms are. I think the issue is that we're not then policed. There's no measurements, at least not that I'm aware of. So there's a kind of there's an intent from the government that Prime should pay promptly, but there's no kind of backup to make sure it's actually happening. And of course, you know, pick up on Ram's point that I don't think we take that clause down to our first tiers. So you may well, you know, if you work with a Prime, you may have a good experience. If you work with a first tier, you may not. And it may be those kind of things that are the issue. But it's been a strange year in terms of cash for us as a business. We've seen a lot of it departing in our commercial aircraft business, and we've seen big chunks coming in our defence business, but it didn't exactly balance the books. But I'll leave that for our annual report.
Well, it's good to hear that the MOD were doing that, and I'm wondering whether actually the DoD in the United States were responsible for putting a bit of pressure on Lockheed Martin to deal fairly with their supply chain. I suspect that very well may have been the case. Ben Rotheray, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just picking up on the point of turnover going up and margins going down. Now, I did some work with an organisation, and they were selling a product to big buyers, very heavy pressure on margins and lower profitability. And we created a new model, which was selling to small customers, lots of them.
And there he was gone. Ben, I think we lost you, Ben. Okay, are you back?
I'm back now. Am I
okay,
on?
Good. We got as far as selling to small customers and lots of them.
I'm just being told by my computer that my internet connection is unstable. I'll carry on. Okay. So yeah, selling to small customers, it was a differentiated offer, but also because we sold it online, we got the cash up in front, and two models and completely different contrasting experiences. Now, sure, it's taken the new model a long time to grow, but now it has grown. And in terms of cash and profitability, it's a huge difference. I know that's a hard journey to go down for many manufacturers, but if you can, it makes a big difference.
So just to reiterate, you're talking about growing an online model in parallel with the traditional sales channel.
It's an online model, but it's a differentiated model, because just doing it online won't help. It has to do something which nobody else is doing, which solves the customer problem. If you can do that, then you get the opportunity to significantly increase your margins. And the big difference is selling to lots of small customers all paying a bit, rather than a small number of big customers paying loads. Not always easy to do, but if you can do, the impact on profitability can be huge.
I think we may be examining that when we're talking about our marketing productions that we're going to be doing. As I said, Mark and I are bang on top of that. Are we not, Mark? And he's gone. Oh, there he is on another screen. Okay, Richard Jones, you put the hand mark up. So please go ahead. What would you like to throw onto the table?
I want to join Steve Murphy on his soapbox. So if he's got space, I think I've got exactly the same message. Any business, any manufacturing business, has to concentrate on its value adds, and the elimination of waste is the elimination of anything that doesn't add value. So if you go back to the Toyota production system, the reason why it works so well for them is because they've looked at every single item of waste in the business. Whether it's space, whether it's workers' time, whether it's time to market, whether it's inventory, and you either add cost or you add value with every single elemental piece of work you do. And you can do that quite simply in your business. You can look through a process, a paper process or a physical process. If it's a car assembly line and the car is going down the line and parts aren't being added to it, you're not adding value. When you add the parts, you increase the value because it's closer to what the customer wants to buy. It's very simple to do your own benchmarking of your own business very, very quickly to determine how much of the activities that you do actually add value. And it's a lesson in what the Japanese taught us or what the American scientists after the war, Deming and Duran, who led the rebirth of people like Toyota into elimination of waste.
That was a great contribution. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, and Steve, I'm sure, will gratefully
accept me on the soapbox. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Bob. I haven't given you any warning on this. I should have done, but you've been putting some interesting stuff in the chat box, and that automatically puts you in the line of fire to be dragged onto the screen. You've got some very interesting observations about waste and whether it's eliminated or not.
But it isn't about waste or whether it's eliminated. It's just there's far more to business than operational efficiency. And all I was trying to put was, having worked in lots and lots and lots of different businesses across the world, I remember the story, or the being in LA once, and we had two factories. One was automotive, one was aerospace. The automotive one was brilliant for operational efficiency, wonderful, fantastic. And the CEO from that business came across the road to the aerospace business, walked around and said, "This is rubbish. This business is useless." So I just sat the two guys down and I said, "Okay, that's fantastic. So why do you think that?" He said, "Well, look, you've got stock all over the place. You've got people running around doing nothing and so on." So I said, "Okay, fine. So how much margin do you make?" He said, 3%. Turned to the aerospace guy and said, "How much margin do you make?" 30%. Sorry, that's not margin, that's return on sales, sorry. That's ROS. So I said, "So how's that?" And the reason was the aerospace was strategically better positioned in their marketplace. They had a product that was the market leader. It was a proprietary product that was necessary and had to be replaced frequently. They had a direct access to the aftermarket, which paid 6 times more than the OEM market. And therefore their business model allowed them to earn a lot more money. Now, there's nothing to have stopped them. Quite rightly, the point could have been made, they could have been more efficient in manufacturing, but it was their creativity and their business model that allowed them to be far more value creating than the automotive business. So let's not get lost. Operational efficiency is absolutely beneficial. It's not the only tool in the toolbox. That's all I was trying to say. And in the work I've been doing most recently with smaller businesses, what I tend to find is the limit is usually in people's heads. You know, we don't have enough, we can't get funding. Well, have a look at your business, have a look at your debtors, have a look at your creditors, have a look at your cash. You've got tons of funding in your business, just release it. We haven't got the talent. Well, you haven't got the talent because you're not allowing people to grow. Yeah, give them the opportunity, give them the support, give them the encouragement. You'll be surprised on what they can do. Well, we haven't got the market. So when we look at the market, it's usually 10 times bigger than they ever need it to be to fulfill their ambitions. And the other thing is they often choose or accept customers that are no good for the business. So they're not aware of what an ideal customer is. So they let bad business in, they service bad business, that leaks profit, and then they wonder why they haven't got better customers, because they're spending so much time looking after bad customers, they haven't got enough time to invest in good customers. That's essentially what I was trying to say, if that makes sense for people.
Well, it certainly makes a lot of sense. I saw a lot of heads nodding then. Who'd like to pick up and reflect on that? Mr. Polstead.
Am I live? I hope I am. Good evening, everyone. Fascinating conversation. I'm going to touch on some of this next week. And the thing I wanted to point out there, brands are built in the mind, products are generally built in the factory. And I guess the challenge for the manufacturing sector is how to build a brand, your brand, in the minds of your prospect. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about that next week, but I guess that's a challenge out there because the the differentiation, the margin, and all those other conversations, yes, you can absolutely compress costs, and I think that's the right thing to do and take waste out of the business. But without the right brand in your prospects' minds and your customers' minds, then you're going to be leaking those sales opportunities all the time. So I think there's, one of my big successes, and again, I'll share some of these tips and tricks next week that I learned along the way. My biggest success was myself and my senior team went on a sales course very, very early on, and we learned how to sell. And I never realized what an amazing skill selling was, because it took me rather than, one of the things they said to me was, selling is not telling. And how many people come and tell you all about how good they're doing and what they can do for you, rather than listening to you in a sales pitch. So I think, I would urge you, for those who haven't done, to look at front-end sales as a way of bringing in new customers, bringing in innovations into the business, and adding margin. Because it's, if you're getting squeezed to 2 and 3% by your current customers, I wouldn't want to be in that place. It sounds like you're working in a cul-de-sac. Now, it may be the market you're in, and maybe it's what's there. But as just been mentioned by the previous speaker, was one of the businesses was making 30% in a high value business, and other was making 5%. Margin is tomorrow's profit, and tomorrow's profit is tomorrow's seed corn that you could invest back into the business. So I urge you to all increase your margins to be able to invest back in the business.
Who's got some thoughts?
Can I just interrupt there, please? Because I completely agree with what Paul's just said. We've tried to establish our brand at MCNC is. We've got Roy on the line here, and I'm in dialogue with him. And do I want to work with Airbus? Yes, we do. Absolutely. Making nice, sexy space parts. Do we need to work for Airbus? No, we don't. Do Airbus need quality suppliers? Yes, they do. Do they need somebody that's technical? So we are in a really good place at the forefront of technology, not having to need their business. So what our approach is understanding their demands, their needs, and more importantly, the problem. Understand the problem, you can offer a solution, and then hopefully you have a happy seller and a happy buyer, and you have a long-lasting relationship. We are striving for not customers we work for, but customers we work with. And that's our approach, and we've been reasonably successful over the last couple of years.
Well, good for you. That's good stuff, Lee. Who else can I turn to? Adam, I saw you nodding when Bob was talking, and you work with a lot of companies in your advisory capacity. How much of this is ringing true to their experience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've worked with Bob anyway, so I was lucky enough in the early stages to be mentored by Bob, and I hold him in high regard, and everything he said there is spot on for me. As others have said, I've always, how can I say, always said, you can have the most efficient factory in the bloody world, but if you're not selling, you're dead. So there's other areas that you do need to look at. It's looking at the whole of the business side of it, and what you can do within that. Coming back to payment, I mean, from a payment side, the ones that have been the swines that I found are more of the bigger businesses. The smaller businesses have absolutely been spot on for me with what I've done. But yeah, there's loads of good points, loads of great points going about. You do get a mix. There's a full spectrum that I've seen across it. And as Bob says, strategically where you're positioned, like, after automotive, very, very low margins, but some strategically position on aftermarket to claw it back because they know they can make the margin there, and they get the return on sales there. So again, it positioning of your business, like Lee said, positioning of your business is critical, and niche in that area. I've had people come to me and say, you know, when I've been working with them, you're going to, you know, these are our terms. And I've said, no, you engage with me. This is my terms. If you don't like it, I'll walk. I've got no problem. I'll go somewhere else. So, you know, I've got no problem in doing that. Yeah, so it's understanding your value. You know, I think Bob said that earlier on. I think Lee said it as well, very first. Knowing your worth, knowing your value.
Well said. Absolutely well said. Who else would like to? Oh, Jeremy, would you like to?
Nick, sorry,
comment on some of the points that have been made in the last few minutes, and
Sure.
how it fits into the paradigm of your report.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. So I absolutely agree. There are lots of other things you can do in your business outside of operational efficiency. I'll give you my experience. You know, in my business, I and my team talk to hundreds of, probably 1,000 suppliers a year. We do hundreds and hundreds of deals for medium and large businesses mostly. It's rare that people are clearly differentiated in the market. So great theory, love it. I completely agree with it. Most customers will be happy to pay more for something that is genuinely valuable to them. Most companies can't articulate that. And I think so spend time on that for sure. You know, I love it when in my sort of procurement side, I'm able to be, it's more of a dating exercise than it is a sort of race to the bottom. Because it's the reality. You know, we're in an exercise at the moment. There are 15 bidders. Not one of them can tell me anything any different from all the others. So it will be a margin compression exercise, because that is the only way to pick between them, frankly, and that's the reality. I think on the other piece really that we talked about, it's about visibility. So ideas are great, that's fantastic, but you've got to have clear visibility of the impact. And if there's one thing I would encourage you to make visibility, is cash. So the decisions that you are making, ask the question, what does this do to cash? And make that clear. And if I can say, what do I see in SMEs particularly, but in big businesses too? I'm speaking to American multinational today, and they have this problem. The vast majority of people in the business don't understand cash, and they lack the financial literacy to really understand the implications of their business. Now in this COVID recovery period, that will hit businesses hard, because we don't have the reserves to make too many errors. And that's the bit that kind of worries me. So I thought Bobby make fantastic points there, and Paul too. I thought they were fab, but visibility is absolutely critical. And whilst these things are true, they are not common in businesses. So we need to strive to make sure that we are doing those basics.
Yeah, it strikes me that, you know, when people don't differentiate themselves, don't make a compelling case to work with me, as opposed to company X, if just competing on price, how much cash is being left on the table there? Hands up, we've got Niraj. Good evening, Niraj. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everyone. What Adam just said about knowing your value, that strikes me. Unless we know our value, how are others or our customers going to know that? So I had an example. I was recently bidding against a very big competition in an account, and the competition is a multi-billion, and I'm not able to decide what is my value. So customer asked me for a price cut, and I very happily give it. While I was already 20-30% lower than the competition, still I gave another 20% off. But later on in the day, I realized that no, there is a value that I'm bringing. So they say 60 days payment term. I said no, nothing doing 30 days, and he agrees for it, and he pays in 25 days. So it is, knowing, if I had known my value early on, then I could have possibly saved those, 20 grand, which I gave in discount, not realizing what my value was. So it's, thanks, Adam. I think it's very important to know. Then only others will realize what your value is.
Yeah, holding up under that pressure. Rowan, good evening to you.
Hi. Yes. Sorry. I had my hand up before Jeremy spoke, so it's kind of going back a bit, but absolutely agree with what Paul said in regards to that branding exercise. And the point that I wanted to raise is, it's all well and good, people saying on this call saying, yeah, absolutely, we should be more visible. But when we get on the ground as marketers and we speak to owners of small companies and small manufacturers, there a lot of the times their response is, well, I'm already at 90% of capacity, so why should I, why do I need marketing? I don't need to be more visible. Neil down the road, I've known him for 20 years. He's my main customer. We're best mates. We go down the pub on a Saturday night. I don't need marketing. And I think it's really difficult to explain to them that actually it's about increasing that profit margin and that operating profit by having a brand. And a key example of this is Apple, right? All of us pay through the roof for Apple products because they're a brand that, apart from Steve's shaking his head. So everyone apart from Steve and Adam don't pay extortionate amounts, but a lot of us do. Okay, well, some of you don't, but a lot of us do. And that's the power of a brand, right? Anyone bought, their other half a Louis Vuitton bag or any luxury item is paying through the roof for a brand, and that's the value and power of a brand. Some of you might disagree, and that's controversial, but Apple's one of the biggest companies in the world, and you can disagree all you like, but that's the position they're in. So, some of us have got to rethink that.
Well, I heard a great story, actually, which, I mean, I take making fun there, Rowan, but you're absolutely correct. It's not just about brand, it's also about values. And somebody said that they witnessed two addresses to, I think it was university students, and one was by an Apple rep and one was by a Microsoft rep. And the Microsoft rep spent all their time saying how their mission in life was to beat Apple. And Apple's address was all about how they could make the lives of the students and their teachers and their communities and everything better through better design and better products. And if you like, it rather sums up what you were saying. Is brand is about more than just a thing and about pretty advertising. It's about living your product. Julian, good evening to you. Hand up.
Well, I was going to say more on the brand thing, and sort of obviously agreeing with Rowan, Apple products and things, and I'm perfectly happy. But I spent a lot of time talking to businesses about what a brand means, and the easiest way of thinking about it is its proposition and personality. So we've been talking about taking inefficiencies out of the business, getting better at selling, but one way of differentiating it can be on the way you behave, the speed of response, delivery schedules, flexibility, accessible, out of hours, problem solving, innovation for the customer. And you get to the point at which you can do an Apple. You can get to the trusted position of a relationship with a customer where they say, I wish they were cheaper, but I'm not going to leave them, because the way they look after us, the personality, from the way they answer the phone, the way they deal with us is the differentiator. Nothing to do with that. Could be one-for-one product quality, everything else. It's everything to do with the personality and the way you deliver. That's what brand really means.
Thank you. That's great. Ram.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Hello again. Yeah, so one of the things I did recently was I delivered a talk called Finding Your Niche to Leicester University and to Thai UK North. And one of the things I spoke about in this talk was about value. Now, there's the story about, a professor crushing a 20-pound note, throwing it on the floor and saying that's not losing its value because everybody knows what a 20-pound note is. But most of us SMEs, people don't know who we are. Therefore, the value is not what we really bring to the table, but what is as perceived by the customer. So it's more important not just to offer value, but communicate it in a way in which the customer understands they're getting value. Like, for example, what I'm trying to say is when we go on holidays, all we want to do is go to the beach and sit on the beach and sip cocktails. That's what we want. But what we need in order to do that is the trip in the taxi, the queue at the airport, the security checkup, the crummy flight, checking at the hotel and all that. All those things are what we need, but we don't want them. So the differentiator will be to portray or project ourselves as something that our target audience wants, as opposed to what the target audience needs. That's where the real essence of projecting our value lies, to convert it from what they need to what they want. Yeah.
Thanks very much. On the question of the way companies talk about, how they value their supply chains, and which frankly often comes across as a bit of greenwashing. I just wonder whether, Jeremy, and you'll be key to comment on this, I just wonder whether, no matter what the good intentions are of a company to say we're going to look after our supply chain, the fact of the matter is you've got procurement departments inside companies whose job it is, absolutely, is to get the best possible deal and not necessarily make many of the value judgments that have been discussed here today. They're literally looking at the pound or the dollar sign, and so I'm that. That relationship between procurement and the boardroom and the messaging that goes up and down. I'm wondering if you'd care to comment on that.
You're about to get me on my soapbox. So my background is procurement, as some of you will know, and I find it the most frustrating and irritating of professions. There are a lot of procurement people who don't have a wider business context, and it becomes can I get it cheaper this year? I just want the same thing. It's a dereliction really to the business doing that. It's not doing the job. Procurement people often moan and say, well, why isn't there a procurement director on the board of this business? Well, frankly, it's because you've not demonstrated that you can create competitive advantage from the way that you manage your supply chain. You absolutely can, but they don't do that. And I think there's the procurement profession, and I mean that with a small p as well as a large p. So the people who are formerly in procurement and the people who do procurement as part of their job, which will be the case in some of the sort of smaller companies, need to understand, they first need to figure out what does their company need to deliver on their value proposition? What does that mean in terms of the way that they run their business? So that drifts it out of just buying stuff cheaper into thinking about make, buy, and other strategic considerations, and then they'll make more rounded judgments. But sadly, that just doesn't happen a lot, and you end up with this sort of disconnected silo approach to life, where you talk to one guy about price and the other guy about the service and the wrap that you need. That is to those companies' detriment. But you will find it a lot. And my challenge that I would say to you guys would be, there are people who get it. Finding those people in businesses is difficult. So the higher up the tree you can get in terms of a relationship and a connection, the more chance you've got of getting that message across, because your average procurement people, I'm sad to say, won't get that. There are exceptions, of course, but few and far between.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I threw that out there, because it's good to hear because I often wonder about procurement people, and as I say, I had the impression that their only mission in life was to drive down the cost per unit. But what you're saying is, if procurement people took a much broader business view, then businesses generally would be run more efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, if really, should I tell you what some of the best procurement teams that we see doing, right? So yes, of course, cost to a degree matters, and price matters, but some of the best procurement teams will build critical advantage for their companies by blocking the competition out from using that supply chain, because they get something from that supply chain that means their business is at an advantage. We did some work many moons ago now with a company who was all about a particular speed to market. They managed to arrange their supply chain in such a way that they were a week faster than everybody else in the world. Actually, they were more expensive. They paid more than anybody else. So A, suppliers loved them. B, everyone gave them great service. But they managed to lock out their competition because they didn't want to work. They didn't want to go and work for the competition because that was all about price. But what they did demand was speed. So if you could deliver on that speed, they beat their competition to the market. And guess what? In their market, it's first to the customer, retains the customer for the next 5 years. So they absolutely dominated, and they've done, I will say this, I put it this way, they'll be spending a lot more time on the beach than in the boardroom over the next few years because they've done super well out of that.
That's a great story. Roy, you had your hand up. It's probably our last comment because we're approaching 7.
Yeah, it's very quick. So in amongst all the other stuff I've done, I spent 6 years heading up procurement for Defence and Space in the UK. And I spent 6 years building and repairing relationships with suppliers, and that's all I did. Everybody else took care of the operational stuff, and it was just all about relationships.
You say repairing. I like that. It sounds like you were able to make your mark, and that's great. But I mean, clearly, as Jeremy has said, there are a lot of procurement places are just not up to snuff. Okay, coming up to 7. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. A special thank you to Jeremy Bowley from Insider Pro. I thought that was great. Your report is excellent. I hope everybody's, if you haven't had a chance to get hold of it, you can get it from the Insider Pro website. Jeremy, remind me what it is, please. Or would you like to put it in the chat box?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat box. And yeah, please go and download it. It's freely available.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, and if you do want the report, because when I close this, the chat box is going to die, but I'll try to remember to get it off the recording and send you. There you go, insiderpro.co.uk, and do have a look at it. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Lee tells me he's got some great Italian wines that he has access to. I'm still stuck with Argentina tonight, but Lee's put me in touch with an excellent importer from Italy, so I should look forward to that. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Great session. Jeremy, super. Many thanks indeed. And we'll see you all next time. Take care.
See you all. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.
And good luck to England on Saturday, Ram.